Hi, welcome to our first Facebook Live Farm Chat of the season. I am Cindy Hall. I'm with the Iowa Agriculture Literacy Foundation, and I'm here with farmer Mark Kenney on his farm in central Iowa, and we're going to spend about 20 minutes with you today learning and seeing his farm and talking about how it's changed over the years. Now, as you can see by my hair, we do have a lot of wind today, so please bear with us with the wind. And we're using microphones today. So given everything that's going on in our world today, we're really being sure to keep our social distance today. So we do have, we're using corded microphones today. So you'll see that Mark and I aren't real close to each other, but we're excited for this opportunity to show you where we're at, to show you the farm and talk about technology in Iowa. March is Iowa History Month, so this presents a great opportunity to talk about how agriculture has changed over time. And today is also near the end of National Agriculture Week. So two great events going on, and we're tying them together with this farm chat to help students learn from home about technology and agriculture and how it's changed over time. Please give us a shout out and let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and ask any questions that you have. I will be monitoring the comments throughout this, and we'll try to have Mark answer your questions. So at this time, I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see the farm where I'm at. Okay, so this is the Kinney family farm, one of the farmsteads, a part of the farm here. It is fairly windy today, so here's Mark,
hello.
Farmer. And so I'm going to turn my back to the window. Actually, we're going to step inside the shed just for our little introduction. The wind just picked up, and we want to make sure everybody can hear us. So again, if you're just joining us, give us a shout out. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We're going to do about a 20-minute farm chat here from a farm in central Iowa, so you can learn about how farming has changed over time.
Okay, so this is where we're at, just north of Nevada in Story County, and actually where our farm's located is pretty much the geographical center of the state of Iowa. So we're right in the middle of everything. For those who aren't familiar, this is known as God's country here. We refer to that. So little history about our farm. My family started farming in Story County in the 1880s. About 2 miles away is the first farm that my great-great-grandpa purchased in 1880. And we still farm that farm today. And actually this photo here is of the Century Farm presentation in 1983 that my family received. That's my grandma, it's my uncle, my grandpa, my dad, my mom, and that's little me in 83. This was the hottest day that's ever been recorded at the state fair when we got this award. So a lot of history there, a lot of people that mean a whole lot to me. Also making a cameo is Secretary of Agriculture Bob Lonsberry, who farmed just up the road from us. And also Farm Bureau President Dean Kleckner is in there as well. So that's those are some of the folks that have operated the farm over the years. As we go through some of these photos, I can get that to separate.
Oh, I think
There's just one?
Yeah.
Okay. This here is a photo of where I grew up. It's just the next farmstead up the road. That's where my parents live. Today, this was taken in the 1940s. Much has changed. A lot of livestock buildings at that time, and 160 acres was what sustained the entire family at that time. It was just 160 acres. This now is.
How would your family have farmed then?
Yeah, back then they had hogs, chickens, cattle. They grew hay. Soybeans really weren't a thing yet. That didn't come till after World War II. So corn, it was just things were just different then. Smaller scale. Of course, my grandpa, Kenney, when he first started farming, he farmed with horses and moved on to tractors when he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s. So in his lifetime, he saw a lot of change, from horses to more mechanization. And that building site there that was in that original photo is here on this more modern one. That's where I grew up. That's where my folks live. We have a lot of our grain storage up there to this day. This farm here, my father and uncle started farming this in their mid-70s. They purchased it in the late 80s. And this is where we've made our headquarters. So this is where we're at today. But some of these buildings, like this one was built about 7 years ago. This one was built over 100 years ago. And we're still using them today. We just repurposed them. This was a livestock building, and now we use it for seed and equipment storage.
You're going to be able to see some of those buildings in a little bit. We'll walk over particularly to one of the old barns and show you how it would have been, talk about how it would have been used long ago, and then how Mark and his family is using it today.
Yeah, and a lot of things have evolved, but they're still here on the farm. This is my dad in the mid-60s. This is a planter, and this is a John Deere. I believe this is a 3020 tractor. And then back here in the background is a grain bin. My grandpa had this put up in 1962. It's a 5,000 bushel bin, and that was the first grain bin, grain storage on our farm. Back 60 years ago was a 5,000 bushel bin. We now have total grain storage capacity between this location across the road and one more of about 300,000 bushels. So things have changed exponentially, obviously, since that time.
We're going to show and tell you and talk about grain storage and show you an old grain crib and some of the grain bins that they use today a little bit later. So hang on and you'll learn more about grain storage.
And this planter here and tractor, this was very, very common at the time. This picture says it was taken in September of 1963. At least that's when they developed it. Yeah, back in those days, no digital cameras. You had to take it and get developed. So this was probably taken in the spring of '63, and Grandma didn't get it developed until the fall. So, but that's what that I mean, this is what it was at that time. You know, open station tractor. This is probably a 6-row planter and a 5,000 bushel grain bin, and that's what you know, very commonplace throughout Iowa. Very commonplace. So we want to have a look at the tractors.
So we're going to walk outside. Bear with us with the wind. If you hear the wind back a little bit, we'll adjust and it will get better. So please don't disconnect. Hang on, and the wind will get better. Mark brought out a lot of equipment today, so you can see how the tractors have changed over the years. So let's keep walking that way, Mark.
Okay. This first one right here, this is a John Deere 60. This is a 2-cylinder John Deere tractor. I mean, that's two cylinders in the engine. This would have been very commonplace on farms in Iowa, this style of tractor in the early 50s. That tractor there, I believe, is a 1953, I believe is the actual model year, or around there. And this is what tractors looked like after the war. Obviously open station. But this was a whole lot better.
Open station means no cab.
No cab, yep. You know, it looks primitive by today's standards, but of course this is a whole lot better than a horse. You get a lot more done on that tractor than you would with horses, and for the most part, that's what that style of tractor replaced, was horses.
Tell us again, Mark, about what years would that have been used, and what would it have been used for?
Okay, this style of tractor would have been after World War II, so mid-40s up through the mid-50s. The tractors at that time, most farms would have had one tractor. So anything that could be pulled by the tractor, planter, any type of tillage equipment, that kind of thing. This one's got a loader on it, so maybe to move bales around and stuff. But really at that time, we were moving from horses to tractors, and most farms most likely just had the one tractor. Very, very commonplace, that kind of thing. Now the next one.
Let's take a closer look so
Yep.
we can see kind of how the controls would work.
Yep, this piece of equipment, you're a lot more of the operator has a lot more physical interaction with this thing. You've got a hand clutch, you've got individual wheel brakes.
You want to point those out so
yeah,
you can see?
Yep. Individual wheel brakes here, you got a hand clutch, this is the gear shift. A lot more goes into steering this thing, and of course these things are extremely loud. When they say a 2-cylinder, there's 2 cylinders in the engine, and they're opposed when they fire, and it makes that, I don't know if some of you may be familiar with that pop, pop, pop. Yep. That's what this thing does.
In a lot of children's books, if they make the sound of a tractor, it'll be a putt, 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 putt. And that's like a John Deere 2-cylinder tractor.
Yep, and that's why a lot of farmers of this vintage lost their hearing, because these things were extremely loud. So this was in the 40s and 50s kind of time frame. This is what that would look like. Transition into the 60s, into the 70s. This is a John Deere 4020. This was a big leap up from the 2-cylinder tractors to these. A lot more power. This one has about 100 horsepower. We still use it on the farm today, even though it's 50 years old. I use it to power grain augers. It moves some snow and different things with it, so they're still very useful. It's a John Deere 4020. Those are tractors that are very iconic, very commonplace on farms still to this day. But as you can see,
let's go a little closer.
Yep, it is 50 years old. Again, no cab. The operator is very much a part of what's going on. You're going to get dust on you. You're going to get exhaust fumes. You're going to get all of that. You're going to experience all of those things. And again, very loud. Very loud. Very different than today's equipment, but this was a big leap up from the 2-cylinder. Now we got a lot more power. We can do more things. This next one, this is a tractor from the mid-1970s. You can see it has a cab. So with the cab came a radio, heater, air conditioning. Big leap up from the open station tractors of the 50s and 60s. This style of tractor existed in the 70s and 80s. So when I was a kid, a small kid, this is what my dad and uncle farmed with, was tractors of this style. We still use this one on the farm today. These have similar amount of power, the 4020 and this one. It's just, there's a lot more amenities with this tractor, a lot more comfort. You have the ability to be protected from the elements. They called that cab the Sound Guard cab, kept a lot of the noises from the engine and the implement away. So a lot easier to operate.
A lot safer too.
A lot safer. That's got a roll cage in it. A lot safer deal. So that was definitely an evolution from this style of tractor up into there. Now the next one, this is a modern day tractor. This tractor is about 3 years old. This is what is reminiscent of a lot of things on a modern farm today. I have a planter hooked up to it. That's a 16-row planter, so it's 40 feet wide, and that is it's what's known as an exact emerge planter.
Let's walk a little closer, Mike.
Yep, and it's got new technology allows you to drive this tractor through the field when you're planting a crop at about 10 to 11 miles an hour. Okay. Which is a quantum leap from technology of the past where you'd go about 4 or 5 miles an hour.
Yeah, and that's not because the tractor couldn't go any faster, but the planter couldn't keep up with planting that fast.
Yep.
So again, this goes about, you said up to 11 miles an hour?
11 miles an hour,
wow.
Yep. A lot of technology involved with this thing. You might be able to see there's an antenna on there. There's a receiver on there. Also the receiver on this tractor, that's GPS receiver?
Yep, that yellow dome-shaped thing at the top of the cab, that's the receiver. And there's you can see a little black antenna sticking up that gets the GPS signal coordinates and the signal to help control the tractor.
And what's really neat about that is when I'm in the field using this tractor, I don't use the steering wheel. I push a button. I have coordinates set in the tractor. It drives the thing straight, which is really awesome because that allows me to have some good YouTube time, some Facebook time, messaging time, that kind of thing. So
what other benefits does it have, Mark? Besides you,
that's really fun too. But also, if we come around here, I'll kind of show you inside the amount of technology that we're able to, or the amount of data that we're able to capture now and use in the farming operation allows me to be a lot more precise with the decisions I make on the farm. when it comes to fertility, when it comes to seed rate, when it comes to where our productivity is on each individual farm. And if we come around here, I can show you some of the data that we actually can create from all this technology. It's not just convenience. Convenience is a big part of it, but it's a lot of the management. So as we come around here, you can see this thing's quite large, but it's extremely comfortable in here. And what I've got with me is a couple of printouts. This first one has planting and yield information. This is a yield map that was taken a few years ago of some soybeans. It tells us where in the field our most productive areas are, our least productive areas are.
Important, Mark. Why do you need that information?
It's extremely important to be able to manage each individual farm on a per acre basis, so I can figure out, instead of just using my intuition, I have data to back up this area of the farm, this 3 or 4 acres, is low yielding. Why is that? Is there a fertility issue? Is there a drainage issue? This area over here is high yielding. So then I can prescribe how much fertilizer we use, the seeding rate. We can better figure out where we might need to add some drainage, those kind of things. Whereas in the past, those decisions were getting made without this kind of data. You would have to just go on your intuition, more or less. And now I can...
what it looked like and what you...
Yeah, and just kind of what we thought, which is similar to a lot of things in our world. You think of now with like Amazon, they're able to target advertising and that kind of thing. Whereas in the past, you might have just had radio spots and TV spots for everybody. It's much more targeted now. This here is a soil test which measures the fertility of an individual farm, and as you can see, a lot of variability across many acres. I'm able to manage each 2.5 acre plot of each farm, each field, separately. And that's all done by the data that's created. It's really, it can get really complex, really get in the weeds with it. But the big thing that I think is helpful for people to realize is that on the farm today, we're data managers just as much as we are equipment managers or livestock managers or anything like that. We are managing a tremendous amount of data, and it's my opinion that those, as time goes on, we're going to continually use this information, and those farmers that really embrace this, they've really got the inside track, because this is where everything in the world is going towards gathering data and using it to be not only more profitable, but a better steward of the land. I use this data to figure out places and areas on our different farms where we're pulling ground out of production and putting back to grassland, putting waterways in, putting more conservation structures based upon the productivity of the land and how environmentally sensitive it is. And now I'm able to use actual data that we've created and collected over the years to target those areas where they're going to have the most benefit. So if we want to kind of move up here.
Yep, we'll just take a quick look, and then I think we'll finish by looking at some of the barns around.
Yep.
Let's take a quick look inside the tractor.
You can kind of see, this is leather seats. This is nicer than my car in here. It's very comfortable. We've gone now to where, 10, 15 years ago, this tractor would have been full of monitors. There'd been a lot of different screens to look at. Now we just have one screen. Everything goes in there. If you're familiar with computer technology of 30, 40 years ago, big gigantic desktop, like an Apple IIc, if you know what that is.
Kids ask your parents.
Kids ask your parents what that was. Now everything's smaller, a lot easier. So I just have the one screen in there. This is so comfortable. Long hours are easy in here. 12-hour days aren't that big of a deal anymore because of the comfort that's in there. XM radio, it's in many ways this is where I like to be. So in our current situation that we're in, my social distancing will not be too difficult this spring.
Very good. Hey, Mark, let's take a walk and look at some of the other buildings on the farm.
Yep, so over here are a couple grain bins that are smaller. These were built in the late 70s. These are about the same age as me. About 18,000 bushels total between those two. Now on the others.
Stop you for 1 second, Mark. So the kids that are watching, a bushel is how farmers measure grain, and a bushel is about the size of a smaller a clothes basket would be about the size of a bushel.
Yep. And then you can't see it from here, but on the back side of that are 2 grain bins that we've had built in the last couple of years, and they total 70,000 bushels. So just in my lifetime, the change in the amount of production that we get off an acre has been so tremendous that the need for additional storage has really gone up. So this is what was modern 40 years ago is much different than what we use today. We still utilize these, but they're not nearly big enough to hold everything that we produce.
Do you want to? I think this is a pretty good shot. Do you want to show them your newer?
Yeah, if we come. Yeah, we come over here. Yeah, my father just dropped in. Yeah.
Oh, he's back in the way.
Yeah, he's back in the way.
Dad just pulled in, and I was hoping to get a talk to him too, or at least see him say hi, but he backed away. So here you can see, I'm going to try to get both bins.
Yeah.
Of course, the small bin that we just looked at is closer to me, so it looks bigger. But the ones in the back, how would they compare in size, Mark, to the ones in the front?
Okay, these two here are 27-foot diameter, and they're about 15 feet tall. These back here,
I'm going to try to get all of them in.
yeah, are 36 feet in diameter, and I believe, let's see, those are 11. They're about 40 feet tall to the top. So you could put 3.5 of this bin inside of one of those. So you could put both of these bins in there twice. So that's what we use. And then we have some bins at my parents' place that are even bigger. We got one that holds 60,000 bushels, which is a big quantum leap larger than that 5,000 bushel bin that was built in 1962.
Well, let's walk over to the barn and actually we'll catch a quick glimpse of this.
Yeah.
It looks like a barn, but Mark, tell us what actually that is.
This is a corn crib. This would have been built, I think in the late 30s, early 40s.
So let's walk closer and you'll be able to see this kind of the slats in it.
And the way that this one has been converted over to where you could put, this is getting a little bit in the weeds, shelled corn. But back in the days before combines, where you harvested corn on the ear, you would put the corn on the ear on the sides. You fill in the sides of this structure, and the natural air would dry it. Now, this one was still utilized up until the mid 80s, and it was converted over to hold shelled corn. So this structure here, the only thing I use it for now is in the middle. We store some wagons in there. So, but this, you see these structures all over Iowa. Some are in worse shape than others. This one's been covered with steel, so it's going to stand for a while. But that's the way grain used to be stored. A lot more work getting it in, and a lot more work getting it out. When I was a little kid, they'd store corn in here. My dad and uncle would, and they would auger it out of this bin into there. It was quite an operation just to move a little bit of grain. Pretty dangerous too. You'd have open augers, loud, dusty. Things were it was a lot more difficult to get things moved around in those days. We've really come a long way with efficiency and safety, and I'm sure glad that I didn't have to deal with that.
Very good. Well, before we disconnect, Mark, let's take a walk over to the barn. It's been on the farm over 100 years, right?
Yep, this barn here, I don't know exactly how old it is, but we do know that it's over 100 years old. And we had it covered with steel probably about 25 years ago. So this thing's going to stand forever. And of course, when this was built was back in the days where, when they poured the concrete and stuff, a little was good, a lot was even better. So this thing is literally going to stand forever. Of course, it was a livestock barn.
So let's walk inside and they can see where the livestock have been.
And where we're standing now would have been a feedlot for cattle, and this would have been the house for the cattle. Whereas now we had some new concrete poured a few years ago, and we use it now for storage. You can see I got my seed in here for this year. Got some machine storage pickups in here. Got different things up on top, an old hay mow. So we've repurposed it.
We're gonna back up to get a broad shot.
Yeah, and the thing is,
in the barn now, and you can see there's 2 floors to this barn. The ground floor and then the above part. So the above part would have been used as a hay mow to store hay in.
Yep, and of course, everything in here on the inside, obviously, this is original, and even though it was built 100 years ago for a different purpose, we can still get good use out of it today. Thing was built really well, and we put an overhead door in, put some concrete in, but for the most part, all the lumber in here, everything's original, and we found a new use for it, and we get a lot of use out of this building, a lot of use. It's a good sized building, and like I say, even though it's 100 years old, it has a lot of usefulness even today. So, as you can see across the farm, a lot of the items that the tractors and different things, grain storage, even though we have quite a generational map, every generation just added on, we're still using a lot of the things from the 50s and the 60s, and you just keep adding on, repurposing, finding new ways to do stuff. You pass that knowledge down. That's a story that's repeated all across the state. We're not unique by any stretch of the imagination. Our family is just like a lot of other families in Iowa that farm. It's a family thing, it's a generational thing, and you keep growing. Each generation builds off of the other one. And I'm very fortunate that I've had the opportunity to carry on our family farm. It's a real neat connection to know that the same thing that I'm doing, even though I do it differently, was what my grandpa and my great-grandpa and his grandpa did. It's a neat thing. That's one thing in Iowa that we're so blessed with, is so many family farms, and there's so many things to learn. I'm learning stuff every day, and there's so many opportunities in this business. It's not just the people that actually do it, all the technology. Most of that stuff's put together right here in Iowa, all the technology and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoy it, and I'm glad you guys were able to kind of see things around and see what we're up to.
Thank you very much, Mark, for giving us this tour of your farm today. It was quite windy. Hopefully the wind wasn't too bad with the use of our microphones. Maybe we'll come back some other time and see Mark in action, maybe during planting, to see him planting in the field. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to type those in the comments now or later, and we will go back and answer those. So thanks so much for joining our Farm Chat today. Thanks.